they would have nativity scenes out in their front door, out of their front door. Look at this. And then they would sometimes have even a bigger one in their house. Okay, so what they do with these nativity scenes is they put them right at their front door, and they, that's the way they decorate for Christmas. They also, only in the malls, you only find, they only decorated with nativity scenes in the malls. And they had these gorgeous nativity scenes that they decorate with in the malls. That we were just like, wow. I want you to notice that they have a basket. It's usually filled with fruits and vegetables. And they actually use real fruits and vegetables, and they change them out every few days. And that was what you give a newborn. You give the family fruits and vegetables. So they would have that out in front of the nativity scenes. And I was always like, why do they have fruits and vegetables with Jesus? But that was their reason.
Their gift she made them.
Yeah. Okay, when we arrived in Paraguay, let me tell you, we didn't know what we were getting into. We got there in May of 2000, and we went right into winter in June. It was like 36 degrees at night. And their houses are built for the heat. So they have the high ceilings, tall windows. They usually have a front door and a back door where the wind can go right through the house, cool things down, because most people did not have air conditioning when we first arrived. In the house we had, you had air conditioning in the rooms, the bedrooms, that is. Okay, now they have what they term split units. So inside the room you have a bar that goes up near the ceiling, and outside there's a unit. The splits, as they call them, have heat and cooling, so in the winter they can help warm your house. But there was nothing when we first arrived. I ended up going out and buying many more blankets, getting us more layers. Because 36 degrees is really cold when you can never get out of it. There were days that we would just all climb under the blankets and play card games or something because it was so cold. Meanwhile, because it is the southern hemisphere, by the time you get to Christmas, it's 100 degrees, so on Christmas Day you go swimming. And I always thought that was a fun thing to do. When we first arrived, we started the first choir, and so it was a Christmas choir. Now most churches have it, but we got people from various churches to come in and do that with us. We also started a children's program, and we did plays. Now, this was our first year, so you'll notice that the three wise men, 2 of them have stripes. Because we had such a hard time getting stuff together for costumes. About 10 years later, we were much better at it. But that first year, we thought, oh man, how do you do this? How do you do it so fast? And it just came up on us. And we realized that, like many South American countries, these children were being taught more about Mary because of Mary worship than they were about Jesus. So Christmas was always about what Mary had done. And I was always like, well, what about the baby? Well, he's just a baby. Like, I mean, a baby can't do anything. I mean, he's just a baby, you know. Well, this is another nativity scene in the mall. And that's Elizabeth's younger daughter. But anyway, so we talked about this baby was very unique, being God and man. And of course, none of us can get that concept, but at least they were hearing it. And it was just really a powerful thing to realize where they were and what they believed. Paraguay has a very unfortunate history. About the same time as our Civil War, they fought against Brazil, Argentina, and Uruguay, and of course lost. I mean, those are 3 big countries. And they lost more than half their territory. And at the end, there were 60,000 men and 300,000 women.
Oh my goodness.
And they did away with marriage to repopulate the country. The unfortunate result is today, nearly every woman has been abused. And it starts at about 10, 11 years old. Usually starts in the family with an uncle or an older brother. And so that was one of my major ministries there, was dealing with that and teaching women that Jesus was with them through that they are still worthy. Most of these women don't believe that God would even want them or would pay attention to them because they feel unworthy, they feel dirty, they feel like their lives were ruined and God wasn't there. But he won't be there now because they're just a piece of trash. And so we have a 3-year program that goes through different steps of, realizing that God was there, that helps you as a wounded person to forgive those, and teaches you about your worth in Christ. My husband worked with youth there, and when we first arrived the very first year, one young man came to my husband after a couple of months and said, "Would you mentor me as a father figure?" We found out that he had been abandoned by his mother at 6 years old because she went off with a lover who didn't want children. And he had been dumped at his aunt's house, who already had 4 children and was a single mom. And he just had no sense of worth, no sense of purpose. He felt extremely unloved. And my husband, worked with him and just sharing the Bible and what our worth is in Christ and what Jesus did for each one of us transformed that young man's life. And last February, he was voted the leader of the Methodist Church, because we were working with the Methodist Church there, but he was voted the leader because he's in his younger 40s, and everybody said that he was, they said he was probably too young. But he is such a humble person, and he directs everything back to God. When you talk with him, he tells you how God redeemed him, and when he's making plans, he's always seeking God. And so I think that was really the reason he got voted in. When you get voted in, you're voted in for 5 years. And so we were like, wow, but he knows who he is in Christ, and that's what makes a difference. The ministry that I started with the women, I started with 2 women who had been very abused. And we developed this 3-year program, and at first it was just in the Methodist Church, and now it's in all the churches, because it's such a huge need in that culture. When we first got there, we worked with the youth and talked about marriage and what God's design was for marriage. And then we had the youth starting to get married. And actually, the first 3 years of these youth getting old enough to get married, it was their parents that would come to us and say, "We don't want them to get married." Why not? "Oh, well, then they're not going to stay together. In a few years, then we'll have to pay for a divorce. They should just live together." And we're like, "No, this isn't the way God designed things." And so then we did a lot of couple counseling, and then it got too much. And we weren't spending hardly any time with our kids, and we thought, this isn't working for our lives. And so then we made up a program on what a Christian marriage is, and worked through that, because a lot of their issues were the same issues. And so we found if we did it in small groups of like 6 couples, and we'd go for 3 months on this, and it worked really well. And then when they started having children, they would come to us and, "How do you parent a child in a Christian way?" So then we did Christian parenting.